Hello everyone, Salam, Namaste, Adab, and welcome to today's event. Today we have Professor Furqaan Qamar, a very distinguished educationist. He is a professor of management. He was a professor of management at Jamia Millia, Islamia, and he served as vice chancellor to Himachal Pradesh University as well as to Rajasthan. He's a very well-known educationist. He writes frequently to national newspapers, magazines, to technical journals. He has authored two books on education, and specialty of his is in public policy, planning, administration, and financing of higher education. As I said, he's a prolific writer, publishes opinion pieces in prominent national newspapers, and he has chaired various committees. He was the Secretary General of Association of Indian Universities, and presently he is serving as the Chief Advisor to Chancellor, Integral University, Lucknow, and the Pro-Chancellor, Dr. Syed Nadeem Akhtar, is also a speaker here who will be doing the concluding remark. And Syed Nadeem Akhtar is a very, very promising educationist, I will say. I interacted him a couple of years back. He is an IIT graduate from Kanpur, and then he is a PhD, I think, because this was part of the
mechanical engineering.
These things. Nadeem Akhtar Sahab is a PhD in mechanical engineering from Kanpur. And now, after doing a executive general management from IIM Bangalore and a double general proficiency medalist from academic excellence at IIT Kanpur, he started taking the positions at Lucknow Integral, and now presently he's a pro-chancellor of the Integral University, basically as a chief operating executive. And Navneet Sharma is not new to us. He has participated at least 3 times in on our forum. He's assistant professor, Department of Education, Central University, Himachal Pradesh. He is also a very well-known
Dr. Sharma,
author and columnist of different newspapers and news magazines. And so with these introductions, I'll say let's focus on the thematic title, Access to Quality Education by Muslims in India. As you know, that this topic for the Muslim community as well as for the entire country is very critical. Is such a large minority of 200 million population in India is not really what you call uplifted enough in education to be compatible. And if you have such a large population not educated enough, that itself becomes a sort of restrictive tool for the development of the country. So it is up to the community and up to the government and all these concerned NGOs to think about it, that what is lacking and how one can best seed into helping this community. So the theme is, how to have the access for the education, higher education for Muslims. So welcome you all. And now with this brief introduction, now I invite Professor Furqaan Qamar for his talk. Furqaan Sahab.
Thank you very much, Professor Raziuddin Saab. First of all, for somehow identifying me for this lecture and facilitating everything for me to deliver this talk to August gathering. Initially, we had thought that the speakers and the introducers and the concluding remark maker would all be in India, but it so happens that today I am in Delhi. Dr. Syed Nadeem Akhtar is in Africa, probably in Nigeria, unless he has traveled to some other country within Africa. And Navneet could not join. Maybe he is in Europe, in Venice. Maybe he'll be joining later. I'm also very grateful for the distinguished participants. And I'm seeing many known names, and I am so grateful to them for responding to the link that I shared with them. I see some very distinguished participants here, like Mr. Delima, who is in fact chairman of the Goa Institute of Management. So I welcome you all and thank you very much for joining. Let me share my presentation. I'm talking about this topic of providing access or enabling access to quality higher education by Muslims in India, not because I am communal in my thought process, rather, I am absolutely national. And it is in the national interest that Muslims, who constitute a significant proportion of India's population, should participate shoulder to shoulder in all walks of life. It is in the national interest that Muslims are enabled to move upward in the social and economic hierarchy, for which education is extremely critical and crucial. If they remain behind up to the level that the Muslims do not participate, to that extent, India would not be able to realize its social, economic, cultural, and global potentials. So it is with this in mind that I have chosen this topic. In fact, I cover only two broad themes: that what is the current status of participation of Muslims in higher education in India, and do we have some hope from the national education policy that was promulgated in 2020. And I just want to inform audience that what it has as far as the minorities are concerned. I'm not going into the history, rather I'm focusing more on the current status. We all know that Muslims account for about 23.9%, about 24% of the world's population.
Furqaan Sahib, you seem to be frozen, I think.
I think he's back. It's back.
Okay, all right.
So I was saying that the latest data that is available about population is of 2011 census. We should have had latest data again in 2021, but somehow the census was delayed, and now the next official data would be available in 2027. In 2011, we had in India about 172 million Muslims, which constituted about 14% of the country's population. There are some estimates which Pew Research Foundation has published from US that by 2020, the Muslim population had gone up to 213 millions, and they account for 15.2% of India's population. Of course, it is not within the India. In the global context, India accounts for nearly 11% of about 1.9 billion Muslims across the world, which is a large number. And India is probably the third largest concentration of Muslim population. I think we are just after Indonesia and Pakistan. But despite their massive share in the population and their size, they are severely underrepresented in all walks of life. And that has been a matter of concern. In 2006, we saw the Sachar Committee report, which in fact showed the mirror. Things have not changed since then much. And even as of now, Railways, which is supposed to be the largest public sector employer in the country, Muslims are just about 6% in the police, particularly at the constabulary level. In the healthcare profession, Muslims are no more than 4%. In judiciary, of course, their proportion is a bit higher, 7.8%. And in higher education now, and now means the latest data that is available is 2021-20. Muslims in enrollment account for about 4.68%. So what we are seeing is that on an average, a population which is 15% of the country's demography has only a representation equivalent to about less than 1/5, rather much more of their population. So in higher education, they ought to have been 15% in all higher education, and they are only about 5% or less than 5%. Now, I have deliberately chosen this 2019-20 data because it has a significance, and I'll share, and during the course of the discussion, it will become clearer. In 2019-20, the Muslim enrollment in higher education was about 5.5%, which later on declined to 4.68%. That is the reason that I'm taking this year. In this particular year, a maximum of 21 lakh Muslims, that means about 0.21 million Muslims, were in higher education, while they were about 213 million Muslims total in our country. So you can see the meager representation that they have population-wise. We cannot deny the fact that the enrollment of Muslims in higher education increased from 2.53% in 2010-11. And if you go back to 2006, it was lower. It means that the old, renowned, famous Sachar Committee had some impact, and the kind of policies that were initiated were having some impact. And therefore, from 2.53% in 2010-11, the enrollment grew to 5.45%, as I just mentioned, by 2019-20. It is not only the enrollment, but even Muslims as a faculty members also increased from 2.95% in 2010-11 to about 6% or 5.5% in 2019-20. Now you might be noting the significance of this time period that I'm talking about, particularly the 2010-11 and 2014-15. So I took the rate of growth, and though in absolute number enrollment and faculty members increased, but what was the rate of growth? And what we are seeing is that between growth in Muslim enrollment was 120%, much faster than the rate of growth between 2014 and 2020, which has slid to a third of or to a fourth of what we had. So now it is growing only at the rate of 37.5%. It means the policies that were started after Sachar Committee, starting from 2007 and 8, they have either been shelved or their effects are waning in the current time. And there are many a reason, and you can know it very well. This is just a repetition of the same data for those who are more tabularly inclined. It says the same thing, that how has the enrollment increased over this period of time. The important question those of the participants who are familiar with India, they know that there are all kinds of institutions. There are some island of excellence. So there are IITs, IIMs, to which we call as institutions of national importance. There are central universities which are funded by the union government. The state universities established and funded by the state government, private universities, institutions deemed to be universities. And within these categories, there are again quality-related issues. Now, this table serves one purpose, as you could see, that in the most premier institutions, the only 0.27% of all Muslims who have been in higher education in this particular year, only 0.27% were in IITs, IIMs. So Dr. Nadeem Akhtar represents that minuscule that minuscule number of people who got the opportunity and who succeeded in pursuing his education in IITs, etc. So that number is not even 1%. In central universities, the number is close to 3%. But I must mention that there are outliers within the central universities. There is an Aligarh Muslim University where, because of its character, if not majority, at least half of the population of the student is this university, by its very nature of catering to Urdu medium education across all disciplines, mostly has Muslims. So the number is high. If you exclude these three institutions, then you will find the proportion of Muslims somewhere around 1% in the central universities. Ratio would also decline. Private universities, although we have many minority universities, but even then, the state universities in aggregate account for only 7% of the Muslims who are in higher education. I might mention that there are many minority universities and higher educational institutions where they are supposed to and they are permitted by law to admit at least 50% of their enrollment from Muslim community. But since private universities are not funded by anybody, they have to mobilize resources, so they are usually expensive, and the community is not able to afford fees in most of the institution. Integral might be a little example, an exception. Even though institutions are established, but people are unable to afford. So that is the story of the private universities. Deemed universities, 1.71% Muslims are there of those who are in higher education. But remember, this also includes a few deemed universities who are minority in character, like Jamia Hamdard and a few other in south of India. Most Muslims go to colleges, and most of these colleges, we have almost 51,000 colleges and standalone institutions, and not even 500 of those colleges are of very high quality. So rest of them are average to poor to very poor. So where are most Muslims studying? In a low quality higher educational institution. And that could be one of the reasons that their participation and their ability to compete for high competitive programs and jobs are very limited. What is written here is as not available, that is about 8%. It could be people who are enrolled in distance mode. So that is the breakup of the 21 lakh Muslims who go where. And the lesson is that they are not able to access best quality higher education, and then they are destined to study in low quality to very low quality higher educational institutions. And the primary reason is the lack of affordability. Now, if we take total population of Muslims and the enrollment of higher education, so this is a breakup of these 2 years. Let me skip this slide. Coming to faculty members, there are in India approximately 15 million teachers, out of which only 83,500 are Muslims. The rest belong to other religious communities. And therefore, the share of Muslim in the total faculty members are not more than 6% as far as the latest year is concerned. Now, if you see the breakup, most of the Muslim teachers are in central universities, but that data is deceptive because they look like to be in central universities because of the 3 universities that I mentioned before: Aligarh Muslim University, Jamia Millia Islamia, and Maulana Azad National University. In the rest of the places, their share is certainly less than 5%. These IITs and IIMs, in enrollment, they cater to only 0.27% enrollment, but fortunately, they have around 4% Muslim teachers on their campuses. Where are these Muslims teaching? That breakup of 83,000 is given. Again, they are teaching mostly 75% of them in colleges. And many of those colleges, or most of those colleges, barring teachers as well. So not only that the Muslims are studying in low quality institution, but Muslims are also being taught by low quality teachers in low quality institutions. And it is these who, when they become teacher, they start teaching. So again, it's a very, very vicious kind of cycle that needs to be broken. Now, the relevance of this 2019-20 would become clearer because when the official data came in 2020-21, we noted that 1.7 lakh Muslims, that is equivalent to 179,000 in the US term, reduced. they were missing, meaning the number of Muslims enrollment had declined. So it had declined from 21 lakh to 19.22 lakhs. And their share also declined from 5. Not only in some institutions, but across all institutions. So the decline was seen in central universities, in institutions of national importance, in public funded universities, in private universities. And the decline was not located or concentrated only in a few parts of India, but 22 of the 36 states and union territories showed this decline in the enrollment of Muslims. And major decline was seen in most populous states like UP, even Muslim-dominated states like Jammu and Kashmir, in industrially progressive states like Maharashtra, even in Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Uttarakhand, Telangana, and most surprisingly, even in Kerala. And at the same time, the total enrollment in higher education in the country across all communities grew up from 38.5 millions to 41.4 million. So on the one hand, we saw growth. On the other hand, we saw decline in the Muslim enrollment. Is it a corona effect? Possibly. But the COVID or the corona then impacted Muslims more than the majority community, than the rest of the communities. In 2021-22, which is the latest official data available, we find that the number of Muslim enrollment again picked up, but it is still less than the 2019-20 level, 2019-20 level. So whatever be the reasons, and I will just explain my understanding about the reasons based on. So I, in fact, wrote one column in Hindu saying Muslim representation and the need for its increase. When this data came in several newspapers, opinion pieces came. And then there were many comments to those columns from friends and also the general readers. Usually the trend has become that they don't write the letter to editor anymore, and they don't want to give their comments on the Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter. But since I also share these articles with a community of people whom I know, and I know that they are, so I share, and then they revert back through WhatsApp, etc. So one argument that many people advance, mostly from the majority community, they said that this is because Muslims are reluctant to send their girl children for higher education. And Muslims are reluctant, so their shares are declining. I did some more analysis of another data at different levels. And then I recounted that perhaps so gender parity index is close to 1, which is very close to that of the national average across all communities. It means it doesn't appear that Muslims are still, they may have been reluctant because of many considerations, but they are not anymore. And therefore, this misconception need to be addressed. The second argument that people advanced is that Muslims' enrollment is low in higher education because Muslims prefer to send their children to religious educational institution or madrasa. Now, In 2006, the Sachar Committee had broken this myth. And before that, the Rangnath Mishra Commission had broken this myth. And even now, if we analyze the UDICE data, we find that only 4% of the school-going age children are studying in madrasa. And even out of these 4%, most are also simultaneously enrolled in modern educational institutions or school, etc. So it is not that Muslims are averse to modern higher education, English education, science education. They are, but yes, some about 4% think the need to send their children to learn their religion. And because of the confusion between maktabs and madrasas are which provides highest level of religious education to produce Muslim scholars. Maktabs are those places where they teach only the basics of Islam, religion, how to pray and how to practice religion nicely is taught in those maktabs. So that is only about 4%. It means 96% of the Muslims are not keen on sending their children, or at least not sending their children to religious education. And the third argument, which merited more analysis and critical discussion, was that in higher education, their participation is low because participation of Muslims is low in school education. And therefore, the higher education suffers from feeder bottlenecks. And we found that only about 0.32 millions or 320,000 Muslims progress to higher education annually because a lot many drop out at various stages. Let me share some data. For example, this is the participation of Muslims at elementary level, and elementary level in India is defined from level 1 to level 8. And there we find that almost all Muslim children are going. So their participation is very close to their share in the population. So in 22, they had reached to about 15.2%. So at elementary level, almost because elementary level education is now compulsory, schools have been opened, access has been provided, free meals are being given. So even poorest of the poor are able to send their children to school. By the time they go to secondary school enrollment, that is 9th and 10th, their participation declines to about 12%, 12.5%. So the rest, 3%, is who dropped out, who could not go for a wide variety of reasons. Because in poorer families, children are also expected to support the family. So they are withdrawn after class A to B or to provide or add to whatever income the family makes by doing some job, etc. Although the child labor is prohibited, but then the self-work, some kind of entrepreneurship, etc. is done, so their ratio declines. And now you will see that by the time they go to 11th standards, (4% drop, 5% drop from elementary level to this level. And that is why the data tells that their numbers have gone up or is going up to this stage, but still there are only 3.09 lakhs Muslims who are at the senior secondary level. Now, we have as a community great hope from the national education policy that given this background, and these are all predated the formation of the national education policy, so they would be able to do some special provisions for the promotion of education across all levels, including higher education. But it is surprisingly, or it's shocking, that this national education policy has avoided naming Muslims or mentioning Muslims in the whole policy document. So if you do some search, you will find that the word Muslim has not been mentioned at all. Population which could be included in SED, and I found that nearly 85% of the population comes under the ambit of this socially and economically disadvantaged group. The poor, the religious minorities, the physically challenged, economically backwards, and socially backwards, all of these things, SC, ST. So by responsible to explain, the NEP 2020 also does not make any mentions of madrasa or Urdu. Urdu, I know that is not a language of Muslims. People down south in Kerala do not align themselves, Muslims do not necessarily align themselves to Urdu, but somehow in the most populous states of the UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Central India, North India, Urdu is identified as a language. And interestingly, Urdu is a very, very Indian invention of languages. So the policy mentions Persian, but does not mention Urdu. And therefore, what is happening is that this minority community, the Muslim minority community, is almost invisible in the policy document, which is sad. Forget about the word Muslims, even the word minorities, which includes 6 categories of religious minorities and many linguistic minorities, including Christians, that is mentioned only twice in the whole policy document of many thousand words, spread over 66 pages or so. The word minorities have been mentioned only twice, but no specific measures have been provided for education of Muslims. We don't see any direct roadmap for the education of Muslims. NEP's silence about deprivation of Muslims, in fact, exacerbate exclusion because it's a psychological barrier that we are not welcome. And there is another thing, that now India's population is also declining. You must have seen many pieces. Even today, Raghuram Rajan wrote that India should urgently do something to become rich before it becomes old. I had written giving data of birth rate and estimated birth rate, actual position would be known in 2027, that the decline has already it has become a decent level of per capita income, which will be good. So policy, I think, realized this, though it does not offer any data, but it said that if there are schools which do not have a critical mass of students and teachers, these schools could be merged. Now, there are 2-3 anxieties in the Muslim community in the country. One anxiety is that merging with whom? So it means these Muslim minority educational institutions might lose their features and characteristics. Second is that if you merge, the schools are likely to move away from the immediate neighborhood. And since receiving education is cheapest when they are available closest to the home, so it means the people who are economically deprived will not be able to afford sending their children away from the schools or meet the transportation cost, etc. So these are the challenges that we have. Now, in conclusion, with regard to Muslims and NEPs, so the policy concedes that minorities are underprivileged and underrepresented at all levels of education, including higher education, but does not provide any specific tailor-made solutions, and asserts that this kind of deprivation and marginalization is not exclusive only to minorities, but it is to all SEDGs, and therefore we are providing reservation to all SEDGs. Now the policy is oblivious to the specific needs and specific interventions that different communities and different deprived groups requires. So the policy that would work for scheduled caste may not work for Muslims. Policy that may work for people who are willingly not sending their children to schools will not work for those who aspire, who desire, who are keen to send their children to education, but are unable to do because of their conditions, economic conditions. And they also do not provide a madrasa. Madrasa plays an important role in literacy, and India is now claiming that it has risen quite up in the ladder of the literacy. State after states are proclaiming that they have achieved 100% literacy. But they think that madrasa could be an alternative kind of an institution, and there is no dispensation. So compare this with the previous of the government of the madrasa modernization, mainstreaming of madrasas into modern higher education. These things seems to have been given away. Now, all of these things lead me to reach the conclusion that Muslims, unlike the myth that has been spread, they value and aspire modern education, want higher education for their children, but they are not able to afford quality higher education. Reason that entry to best institutions of excellence is very competitive. And if you want to compete, it requires a lot of money to prepare yourself to crack the examination. So be it medical, be it engineering, be it management. So the community does not have that kind of wherewithal. Most of them are therefore forced to go to poor quality, and therefore they are trapped in that vicious cycle of not affording quality, compelled to send their children to poor quality institutions, and then these quality institutions graduates are unable to get any jobs or not able to make a dent, are unable to improve the quality of life of their family. So that leads to many different kinds of aversion, and therefore affordability is at the forefront. When it comes to Muslim teachers, they are not able to have as much impact in the community, in the society, because most of them are teaching in those colleges which are called as non-district colleges. They are just mimicking higher education, and therefore as I mentioned before, we need to do something that if a community constitutes 15% of the population, we cannot remain satisfied with their 5% participation. We have to do something to triple their participation in higher education. Finally, Muslim minority institution can be of some help, because at least they don't have that kind of stigma or barrier of closing their door or shutting their door for Muslims. But in fact, they are, number one, few and far between. They are expensive. They are beyond the reach of population. And therefore, our solution that I think, this is my dream, that all higher education institution in the country must represent the cosmos of the demography of the country. So if every higher educational institution has about 15% Muslims, I think things would change. I think that requires a sustained kind of interventions, policies, kind of interventions in the sense that Muslims are not deprived, and those kind of things that, okay, if you are in hijab, you can't enter into the campus, if you can't take competitive examination, if you are covering your faces, I think they are only discouraging Muslims, which need to be stopped. So I think I'll stop here. I think I have exhausted the time that was given to me. Maybe I have exceeded, for which I'm sorry. So thank you very much for this opportunity to be with you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Furqaan Saab. And now let's hear Dr. Nadeem Akhtar Saab for the concluding remarks. And after that, we will have the questions session. Nadeem Saab.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to one and all from here in Nigeria. It is a pleasure to be able to address all of you after the wonderful session and the address delivered by Professor Furqaan Qamar upon the invitation of Dr. Raziuddin Saab. So thank you very much, one and all. In the past 50 minutes, we have had a great dive into the specific statistics of the status of Muslims as far as the education sector is concerned in India. And the entire talk has so beautifully brought out the various aspects of the involvement of Muslims, especially in the higher education in the country. There have been very timely comments on the relevance of the madrasa education, and as well as the schools, the secondary and the higher secondary education. And overall, I think a wonderful study by Professor Furqaan Qamar about the statistics and the status of Muslims. It is from these various numbers that Furqaan Qamar Saab so beautifully presented in his address, that any intervention or policy that has to be designed has to keep all these figures in mind. Because I have been assigned the task to deliver the concluding remark, let me spend a few minutes on recapturing the address of Professor Furqaan Qamar Sahab. In the beginning, he very clearly said that he'll divide his lecture into two parts. One would cover the statistics of the education, and the other would talk about NEP 2020, especially keeping the minorities, the Muslim minorities, in mind. He very beautifully set the context as to where do Muslims stand first in the world. And out of those, the entire Muslim population in the world, 11% resides in India, a very, very significant number. The status of Muslims within India, considering the fact that there are more than 1/10 of the Muslims are in India, are completely opposite to each other. We would expect that such a large Muslim population would be doing much well, especially in proportion to the share in the population in the country. But the facts and figures state otherwise. One of the interesting remarks or observations from Professor Furqaan Qamar's presentation, while he was mentioning the participation of Muslims in various sectors, civil services, army, railways, etc., was that the Muslims are least underrepresented in the judiciary. In other words, the highest representation that Muslims have in government sector is in the judiciary, which is a very promising figure, something that was not known to me earlier. And if we were to chase the target of attaining the percentage representation proportionate to our representation in the population, I think working on the judiciary would be the lowest hanging fruit. I'm sorry, would you like to say something, Professor Furqaan?
No, I was just saying that in between we lost your voice, so now you are back again. Thank you.
Let me repeat myself. What I found very interesting was that the Muslims are least underrepresented in the judiciary. So to raise the level of participation to the level of our proportion in the population, it is the easiest to do so in judiciary. Judiciary is the lowest hanging fruit, is what comes out from this figure. Something very, very interesting. Another aspect that we would like to correlate with the enrollment ratios of Muslim students in higher education is the interesting statistics as to how many Muslim faculty are actually employed and teach these students. Now, I would not go into whether increasing or decreasing the number of Muslim faculties would increase or decrease the enrollment of Muslim students. I don't want to bring any correlation there, but it's a very interesting fact that the enrollment of Muslim students is quite similar to the employment of Muslim faculties in the institutions. So, and we can actually say that one follows from the other, because about 4% of the students, Muslim students, are studying in higher education institutions. The faculty percentage, Muslim faculty percentage, is also about 5.5%. So this, the more students progress through the education from primary to secondary to tertiary, the more will be representation in all the sectors, and so also in the higher education sector. Then the statistics on the distribution of Muslim students across various types of institutions like the central universities, institutes of national importance, the private universities, deemed universities, etc., was highlighted. And what is to be noted here is that about 78% of Muslim students study in colleges. Now, it has been said often that bulk of these colleges do not rank high in the country. I will not comment on their quality, but if you see the rankings, whether it is NIRF or the accreditations, whether it is NAC or NBA, we don't find bulk of these colleges. In fact, less than 1% would feature in such rankings and ratings. So 78% of Muslim students are mostly studying in colleges that do not appear in rankings and accreditations. And we can infer from this that they are not having access to quality education at the moment. Another point that was beautifully raised by Professor Furqaan Qamar Sahab was that we saw a stark decline in the enrollment of Muslim students in the year 2020-21. Now, I would like to attribute this again to the socio-economic status of the Muslims. Like we see, the socio-economic status on an average of the Muslims is much below that of even the OBCs in India. Whether you talk of the per capita income or access to other facilities, I believe that the one reason could be the access or lack of access to online learning or online learning equipments to the Muslim students. And the other would be lack of access to affordable healthcare. Now, this was the period when we were having a health scare across the world. And the priority for everyone would be first to stay safe and healthy, and then to pursue education and other interests. So if we as a Muslim community lack access to affordable healthcare, a bulk of our resources are going to be spent on healthcare, and we don't have much time or resources or energy left to pursue education, especially online education during that time. That is how Professor Furqaan Qamar Sahab beautifully captured the statistics of the Muslim enrollment, especially in the higher education sector. And then he beautifully brought up the
Sorry, go ahead.
His views, his views on the national education policy and how it does recognize that the minorities are underrepresented in the education sector, but it does not provide any specific interventions or suggestions to enhance the participation of minorities, especially Muslim minorities in the country. So in this scenario, I think we as educationists are forced to look outside the NEP 2020, and we are also well advised to look outside mere government intervention to see how we can improve the enrollment of Muslim students in education, both at the school and the higher education level, and also the quality of graduates that these institutions would ultimately produce. Professor Furqaan Qamar Sahab closed his talk with mentioning the implications of all these statistics. And two very strong points that he mentioned was first to triple the participation of Muslims in higher education institutions, which shall be proportionate to their share in the population. So tripling is what is the key word here. And he very beautifully and very rightfully pointed out that all higher education institutions have to be inclusive and represent the true construction of the Indian society. In fact, this is also what he started his address with, and I cannot agree more with that, that when we talk of the Muslim community in this lecture, in this webinar, it is not because we're trying to bring a communal angle. It is merely because this nation can be considered as a vehicle, and the various sects and communities can be considered as the wheels of that vehicle. Now, for that vehicle, first to move straight and to drive straight, and also to gain speed, it is imperative that all the wheels of the vehicle are of the same size. It is a pity that the wheel that the Muslim community represents or is represented by the Muslim community is not only smaller in size, rather it's also filled with a lot of patches, has been punctured many times in the past, and is struggling to keep pace with the other wheels. So that was the lecture, ladies and gentlemen, by Professor Furqaan Qamar Sahab, very beautifully brought about in this webinar. To close, I would just like to say that while studying the statistics, I also took some time to focus on the primary, middle primary, secondary, higher secondary enrollment numbers. What is surprising to see was that the Muslim students' enrollment at the primary level has been higher than the national average. This is a very surprising thing. And one of the reasons could also be that if you talk of the age of Muslims, age distribution of Muslims in India, and you talk of the age period between 0 to 14 years, India has 24% people in this age band, 0 to 14 years. Whereas 40% of Muslims fall in this age gap. There is a huge number of Muslim students and Muslim children below 14 years of age compared to the national average. Now, this also gets represented in the primary school enrollment levels. And initially, also the girl students' enrollment at the primary level is higher than that than that compared to the boys. So the girls are, from the data that I have from 2021 to 22 by a data-driven analysis by Professor Arun Mehta, girls almost have a 16% enrollment in primary level, whereas boys have a 15.4% enrollment level. Now, what has happened is that slowly the boys have overtook the girls in terms of enrollment. The girls have been dropping out from schools because of socioeconomic reasons. And as a result, their relative representation compared to Muslim boys has been falling. Overall speaking, both Muslim girls and Muslim boys have been dropping out of school, and their enrollment in the school level has fallen to as much as 10% at the higher secondary level, and as was pointed out, close to 4% in higher education. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is one side of the story where we have continuously talked about enrollment, and the poor representation of Muslim students in educational institutions. The question is, how would we address this problem, and how do we improve this number? Now, the thing that easily comes to our mind is, let's build more schools and colleges. While it's a good thing to build more schools and colleges, we must also take some time and think about what is happening to the existing schools and colleges. A bulk of the existing institutions have vacant seats and vacant capacities, which are not being filled by students of any community, not only Muslims, but any community. So the infrastructure exists, the teaching faculty exists, but there are just no more students to take admission in those programs. We can attribute this to several reasons: quality of education, relevance or irrelevance of the subjects or the curriculum, etc. But the question is, if we build new institutions, what is the guarantee that the programs being offered at the new institution would have contemporary curriculum and would offer relevant training and high quality training? There is no guarantee. In fact, most of the institutions that grow organically tend to focus on traditional and conventional subjects. It is only the institutions that have a backup from the corporate houses, which can infuse large amount of funds at the time of establishment, that they can think of introducing modern quality education since the very inception. So while it's a good idea that we think of establishing more and more institutions, I think what is a better idea is that we look at the vacant seats in the existing institutions in the country, and we design a policy and we design interventions so as to promote and facilitate a higher enrollment in those institutions. Like I said, NEP has been quite silent about the interventions required to enhance the enrollment of Muslim students. And we as members, as educated members of the Muslim community, must come together and find out ways to collect the data on the vacant seats in these schools, colleges, and universities. Then we could tie up with regional bodies to promote enrollment, first to create awareness and then to promote enrollment in on these vacant seats. We must also try to bring in financial support for these communities so that they are able to take part in to enroll themselves in these institutions. This way, we would be utilizing the existing infrastructure, both physical and the human resources, while plucking the low-hanging fruits, which is just to bring enrollment to the existing institutions. Once we have done that, parallelly, we should also be looking at enhancing the quality of these institutions. And again, the community together has to, the community members have to come together to see how can we influence the teachers to go for faculty development programs, how can we enhance their communication skills, the knowledge of the subjects, etc., etc. All in all, the academic community and the business community of the Muslims have to come together to to solve the problem of underrepresentation of Muslims in in India. Alone, we will not be able to solve this problem anytime soon. And once we get together and decide how can we take care of the finances, the education quality, and as well as creating awareness and enhancing the enrollment in the existing institutions, I think we would start moving in the right direction. Before I close, let me also mention that Muslims have done a wonderful job with regards to in the field of education in India. I know at least 31 universities established and being beautifully run by Muslims. Integral University being one of those, which is also a NAC A plus accredited, highly ranked university. There are so many institutions in southern India, in East India, in the north, extreme north of the country, which are doing very, very well. Now, even these institutions have vacant seats. Some may have 90% full and still 10% vacant seats. So those are these places where we should target our interventions. People are, people have built legacies in building institutions. Of course, the first name that comes to our mind is late Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. But then, for example, there is the founder of Integral University, Professor Syed Wasim Akhtar, who is also called Sir Syed Sani, here in the north. And then there is a Sir Syed of the south. So there are these people who have done wonderfully, wonderfully well. As far as the education sector is concerned, even we have wonderful schools run and established by Muslims in India. So all in all, compared to the other minority communities, we talk of Christians, Jains, or Sikhs, Muslims have exceeded all of them in the number of institutions that they have built. And even in the number of institutions that have been recognized as minority institutions by the government of India. So the situation is not grim as far as the infrastructure is concerned. It is just that we need to come together, both the academic and the business community, to find out ways to create awareness, to generate resources, and to direct them to in the right direction. With this, I will close my address. I thank you for your patient listening. I congratulate Professor Furqaan Qamar Sahab on delivering this very insightful lecture, and Dr. Raziuddin Sahab for having given us the opportunity to talk on this matter. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Nadeem Saab. Since I see Navneet Sharma joining late, though, so it would be nice if he can make some comments, whatever way he can contribute, maybe for 5 minutes, and then we can do the question and answer. Navneet Saab?
जी शुक्रिया प्रोफेसर फुरकान कमर साहब and Raziuddin साहब and Nadeem Akmal साहब. It was indeed an interesting and very captivating way, the way we started reflecting upon this. First of all, I wish to just mention that technology may look very meticulous and professional, but at times it can make you look very unprofessional and flustered also. So I apologize on that part because somehow I could not connect in the beginning. The only thing that I wish to observe is that people like Professor Furqaan Qamar is now an endangered species. Why I call Professor Furqaan Qamar an endangered species? Because he always represent even very pessimistic numbers, very pessimistic data with a sense of optimism. There is always a way out that he reflects upon. And his more than 5 decades of experience in higher education, of course, gives that vantage point to him when he was member of planning commission as an education advisor, or when he was vice chancellor of 2 universities, even Central University of Himachal Pradesh, the hand holding, the mentoring, and the kind of things that we have learned with Professor Qamar, of course, tells us more about that how he believes in that idea of hand holding, and that's what the idea of hand holding he is also doing about minority education. But somehow I'm not as optimistic as Professor Kamal says. Why I'm not as optimistic? That because in the recent times and in the last decade, we have been trying very seriously to remove any minority from the plain sight. For example, if you look at the NCRT textbooks now these days, you won't find any character named as Ali or Rahim or any mention of the festival celebrated by Muslims. Look, we need to, beside other ideas, we need to see that how the partition of the subcontinent has also played a very checkered role in the history of Muslim education in India. Why the finances dwindle, why it is easy to communalize the whole issue, why any government can turn a blind eye to the 15% of the population and club all minorities in one very umbrella kind of term, which is SEDG, socioeconomically disadvantaged groups. So there is no mention of Muslims, and as Professor Kamar pointed out, Urdu and secularism anyway is a hated word these days. But why, why I don't believe that only by adding more number to the colleges or to the schools will only bring an idea of quality, because quality is something which is also there in the curriculum. Quality is something which is there in the pedagogy of the teacher. If there is a teacher in the class who has this exclusionary idea about minorities, probably you won't find that child getting into that curriculum. So quality is something not only about getting a blackboard or getting access. Of course these are important concerns, but quality is also about the representation of the self, representation of the culture, representation of what I have been believing into and what I have been brought up into. And if we exclude all these things, probably the issue of quality will always remain an important issue. And we need to reflect upon this, that despite these kinds of democratic havocs being played upon in our country, how we can make as teachers our curriculum more inclusive, our pedagogies more inclusive. And once we start in becoming inclusive, probably we'll have this concern for the quality. Probably the concern will be that how the child is constructing knowledge, how the child is constructing identity, how the student in higher education is constructing his or her identity as a Muslim in India, as a citizen in India, as a universal citizen or as a cosmopolitan citizen in India. And one last thing that I just wish to point out, that whenever it comes to minority, the onus should not lie upon the community. No, it is not the community's job to open more institutions. It does it fine, but it is the job of the state, it is the job of the welfare state, it is the job of the government of the welfare state to see that the onus does not goes and the question doesn't become like that. Will be asked the same question if this is the question of quality education for Hindu child. Will that be also a concern for the Hindu community? And if it is not for the Hindu community to worry about Hindu child, it should not be the question for the Muslim community to worry about the Muslim child. It should be the worry of the state to worry about the child, irrespective of caste, race, religion, gender. uh, Thank you. I'm sorry again for joining late, but yes, of course, it's always pleasure and honor to listen to Professor Kamar, and more power to him, more power to his writings, and soon we may write something more upon this, because many of the ideas which Professor Kamar has talked can lead to many other writings and ponderings in the academic discourse. Thank you, everyone.
Very good. Very well said, Navneet Saab. I wish India is that idealistic or ideal welfare state, which it is not. So the community, unfortunately, has to find ways to uplift itself. The state doesn't do the things for community. So it's the unfortunate situation. Thank you very much for joining from there. Rafat, please show the poster for upcoming Saturday. We always have to do the announcement for the upcoming Saturday. And last, I think Navneet Saab has said about partition. This is one topic which became the most critical element in the partition support of Muslims to Muslim League in 1946 assembly elections, myth and reality. Actually, Anil Maheshwari, a very senior journalist in India, he has written a book and an article coming, I think, in Economic and Political Weekly with this title. So we borrowed, he is a speaker in our session, and we borrowed this title from him. And he will be joined by Dr. Atar Farooqi, who is the General Secretary of Anjuman Taraqi Urdu, and two very well-known intellectuals in India. One Professor Shafiq Adwai from Aligarh, who is presently the director of Sir Syed Academy, and a very prominent author of Jinnah, a very prominent historian from Pakistan, Professor Ishtaq Ahmed, who is presently in Stockholm University. So over to Dr. Rafat Hussain for moderating the question answer session. Rafat.
Thank you, Dr. Raziuddin, and thank you all three speakers. Wonderful talk, wonderful analysis, and we always look forward for this type of analysis because we are interested in the community welfare, especially the education. So thank you, Dr. Raziuddin, for inviting Furqaan Saab. And Navneet Sharma ji, thank you so much, and Sayyid Nadeem Akhtar for a wonderful concluding remarks. So the question and answer session is open now, and you can raise your hand in the digital area, digital hand, and put your comment or questions in the chat box. So let's begin with the chat box first because I already have some of the questions or comments. So let's begin with the comment from Iram Gul, and then the question comes following questions. So she's saying, Dr. Gul, that means Indian secularism is still incapable of assimilating different communities and the Muslim as well in the Indian society as human beings and treating them as minorities or other communities. Consequently, that Muslims themselves have to analyze here their ratio, percentage, and participation in the very important educational system, which is strikingly low. So her question is, you said that teachers' standard is so low where the Muslim students are getting education. Why this is the case? Please go ahead, Furqaan Saab.
Thank you very much for asking this question. I think part of these issues have been answered either between the line or explicitly. Yes, Muslims are underrepresented. It's been almost 75 years or more than independence, and we had expected to do much better. Things had started moving in right direction post-Sector Committee, and I think there were more positivity in the system, but sadly it had a setback. So I wouldn't blame secularism for that because unless we are secular and the respect for all community and treating all communities as equal, a country like India, which has so many different kinds of diversities, will find difficult to cope with many issues. I think India was being cited as an example of people living in cohesion despite such significant diversities. Lately, there have been some setback. I am still hopeful that these are the temporary phases. How temporary, I can't say. But yes, the facts are before you. And your observation, I would only like to moderate by saying that I don't blame for this the secular credentials of the country or the policies that India followed so far. Rather, the only hope that I have is that this secularism uh, continues, which is enshrined in the constitution of the country.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Furqaan sir. The next question is from the screen name iPhone 7 or 17, anyway. So thanks for enlightening talk. Firstly, it is not easy to get admission in higher educational institution in spite of the merit. Secondly, the higher education is so expensive that a Muslim cannot afford. And thirdly, the apprehension that a Muslim will invariably not get a job discourages them to opt out to go for higher education. How can the Muslim community get out of these impediments?
Very challenging question. I had a slide, but I think I did not show that slide, but Dr. Sayyid Nadeem Akhtar pointed many different ways in which the community can come forward. Although Navneet does not discuss with that formulation, he wants the states to play a more proactive role to promote higher education amongst Muslims. Basic challenge is addressing the issue of economic marginalization and social marginalization, and coupled with that, certain stigmatization that keeps happening occasionally and sometime over a sustained period of time. So that happened at the time of partition, that happened in between, is happening more recently. These things, in fact, pulls the community into its shell. But I think I'm as hopeful about the possibilities as Dr. Sayyid Nadeem Akhtar mentioned. Because despite all of these problems that I highlighted through the data and that we understand, there is still no aversion from higher education or from education amongst any community. Let me, for the time being, go beyond Muslim community. Every time we are shown data by the chambers of commerce, industry, and certain other surveys that Indian higher educational institutions produce unemployable graduates. The people are not only getting jobs, not getting jobs, but they are also not capable of getting jobs. All of these should have, speaking normally, should have deterred people from chasing higher education. But I believe that there is still some value that people get in education and higher education, that despite all those negative comments, people pursue a higher education. So Indian per se aspire to receive highest level of education. Muslim community is no exceptions. Rather, when they are facing serious challenges in their survival, so then their focus on education, higher education becomes more. I would agree with Navneet to this extent that this solution that the community itself must take care is not a right kind of argument or right kind of solution. So first of all, the community itself doesn't have the economic wherewithal. Second thing is that we live in a welfare state. Indian constitution not only guarantees that the minorities can take care of their education or can have education of their choice, but it also guarantees that there would be equal treatments to all. I think we all need to think, there may not be a ready-made solutions, but we all need to think to find out that what needs to be done. Presently, we have been thinking in piecemeal manner. So some people said that Muslims are not interested, other things are of more priority. You must have seen lectures and sermons of many Maulvis saying that this is a community which spends so much on marriage ceremonies but does not spend money for the education of children. But it is not a holistic perspective. I think we need to take things in a holistic perspective. I think this question itself requires 1 hour lecture explaining the reasons, but I think it has to be a joint efforts, combined efforts by all. I would in fact invite the majority community. I would in fact invite the Christians whose institutions are fairly of very high quality generally. So we may require them to handhold these Muslim minority institutions and teach them how to provide selfless service to the cause of higher education. So there are issues, they have been talked about, but many more need to be worked out together along with everybody, taking everybody into account. I would involve my majority Hindu friends. There are many who are as progressive, wanting the total welfare of all communities. So they all need to come together to do the job. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well said, Dr. Qamar. Okay, the next is from the digital hand. Hassan Saab, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, I'm joining you from Dallas, Texas. My comment is, and question later, that we are stuck in this 4 to 5% trap because our pipeline is broken at the base. That's where all the leakage is happening, and it is a question about fixing the quality of our schools. It's not just about what percentage representation we have, enrollment in the schools. It is about the quality of education being imparted. And that's where fundamentally all the problem starts and goes on to middle, secondary, senior secondary, and university education. My question to Furqaan Qamar Sahab and to Nadeem Sahab is that what is being done to focus on fixing the quality of school education in India, which is, I think, the primary cause, the root cause of the problems that we have. So we may be barking up the wrong tree, talking about higher education and having more institutions of higher education or filling up the vacancies there. The real issue lies with the schools, and Nadeem Saab says one thing, that there are many wonderful schools run by minorities. I would like him to name 5 of them to me, because I have extensively toured in India and gone to schools. It's a passion for me, and I hardly find an excellent school. And he comes from Lucknow. So tell me how many schools are there that can compare just with your Lucknow schools like La Martiniere or St. Francis. So I would like to hear from you about what efforts are being made at the school level of education, which is, I think, is, unless we fix that, we'll never escape from this 4 to 5% trap. We'll always remain there. Thank you.
Thank you, Hassan Saab. I think you are Mr. Hassan Ghayaz Saab. I think we met during your last visit.
Yes, Jamia. We have met both at the IDWDCM conference in Delhi in 2022, and then I visited you in your office in Jamia, Millia Islamia, and had the benefit and the honor of a conversation with you along with a couple of your colleagues. Yes, I'm the very same person, and I hope to meet you again sometime, inshallah, when I come to Delhi in November or December.
And to Lucknow. So Nadeem Saab, would you like?
I've met Nadeem Saab also. He was very kind to pay for my dinner. I offered to pay, but he paid for it.
So Nadeem Saab, would you like to answer this question?
Absolutely. Thank you, Hassan Ghayaz Saab. It's a pleasure to see you today here. In fact, a lot of points that you raised are absolutely correct, and that is what I also tried to convey in my concluding remarks, that there is enough opportunity at the top. And when I say top, I am referring to higher education and the job market. The reason why we still face problems in entering the higher education sector and then finally graduating and securing job opportunities is because of the training we have had in the 12 formative years before college. Now, I often say this, that universities and colleges are unfairly assessed on the quality of graduates they produce. Why I say this is because on an average, a student spends 3 to 4 years in a college or a university, while he or she spends 12 years. I mean, every one of that student spends 12 years in a school. Now, if the community and the country as a whole expects the college and the university to undo the 12 years and to bring about an altogether different person in the 3 or 4 years, while he or she is in the college or university, that's an unfair demand. Now, we have to address this, and as you rightly pointed out, this has to be done at the school level. So enrollment is definitely, and proportionate representation is definitely one of the concerns. But even if we were 15% in schools and colleges, would it have really solved our problem? There comes the question of the quality of education. Now, what I see is that when we say that the quality of education is not good in the country, it is for everybody. It's not only for the Muslim community. When we are able to enhance the quality of any school or college for that matter, this has been my limited experience, that students from every community get an equal opportunity in being considered for admission into those colleges and schools. It ultimately comes down to their own merit. Now, there are so many historical reasons as to why we have these poor quality of education in schools. And it is good to know all of those reasons. Much of those are because of the socioeconomic background of the Muslim community. But delving into that is one aspect. What can we do to enhance quality is the other aspect. Now, Philip Crosby wrote a famous book which was titled "Quality is Free." Now, quality is free when you build quality in the organization or the institution since the very beginning. But the more you delay building quality into your organization, the more expensive it becomes. Our school education has been here for so long that to bring about a slight change, enhance the qualifications or the skills of the teachers or the infrastructure by even a small percentage requires a lot of investment and willpower of the management and the community. That is why I believe that a larger community, not only academicians, but also economically advantaged members of the community have to come together to slowly, pick schools 1, 2, or 5 at a time and start building upon those institutions, upon those schools to enhance the quality. How to enhance? There are just so many ways in which the quality can be enhanced, of course, by teachers, by curriculum, by better infrastructure, by better training, etc. That's a different subject altogether, but it's very rightly pointed out by you that if we resolve the school education crisis, we have actually resolved the education crisis.
So let me ask you a direct question, Nadeem Saab. No offense meant. You have created a wonderful university, Integral. I've been there. Why can there not, or have there not been 10 integral schools? Jamia Hamdard has one school, good or bad, I cannot say. Why can't there be 10 Jamia Hamdard schools? Hamdard has a great brand equity. So have you and the likes of you in India been negligent in addressing this very fundamental issue of fixing school education? You are the education leaders. And if you can't do it, who else can?
Well, I take your question with all sincerity, and
It's asked in all sincerity. It's not meant to
yes,
be a criticism. What I'm asking you is out of passion and full sincerity.
it is a very genuine concern. It's a very genuine concern, and I think we as human beings tend to demand more from people who have already contributed comparatively more.
Naturally.
And right, and for to establish a university and to administer it the way it is being done is quite a task in itself. Integral does have a school which is doing wonderfully well in the area which it caters to. Of course, there's a lot of scope of improvement there. But why are there not 10 more integral schools? There will be, inshallah. We are on it. Things take time. Things have to fall in place. By the way, schools are coming up. You asked me a question as to what are some of the good schools by Muslims. There is this good school that P.A. Inamdar Sahab runs in Pune. There's the Hamdard Public School, which you already mentioned, the Crescent School in Chennai. There is the Alameen Public School. There is the Muslimin Anjuman Muslimin in Bombay and
Just
Maharashtra.
one of them compare with
Thank you,
Jamia.
Nadeem Saab, and thank you, Hassan Saab,
Okay.
for your
I-
concern. Let's move on because there are more questions.
All right, yeah.
I'm
Fair,
so
fair.
sorry that we have to move on. And of course, there is always a wonderful discussion. And now the Imtiaz Saab, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum all. Thank you all three speakers for very informative presentations and good follow-up discussion. There can be no disagreement about the quality education. It is necessary across the world, especially in India, when Muslims are handicapped because of poor quality education, and as Nadeem Saab mentioned, that it has to be at all levels, school, not only at the higher education level, but starting from the school education. My question is, what is the awareness among the Muslim community in India about character building, kirdar sazi, as part of quality education? And the context of my question is, if Muslims are knowledgeable and of high character, they will be expected or they will be accepted as enlightened and respected community members. In this era of othering the Muslims and demonizing them, it is very important that Muslims be model citizens in India. What is your thought about it?
Thank you, Imtiaz Saab.
Before Nadeem Saab answers this question fully, I would only say that yes, it's a very, very critical question, and I think I understand and I agree with your concern. And it is generally assumed that education is the way of not only making people knowledgeable, but also behave morally and with integrity and with honesty and so on and so forth. So education was seen and is being seen as a solution. Somehow, what we are finding is that तालीम के साथ तरबियत, so तरबियत कहीं पर थोड़ा सा लड़खड़ा गई है. So although now the curricula are including values education and training people in dealing with individuals and being nice in all of those things, But yes, it's a major concern, and it's a major concern for everybody, for all community. But agreeing with you, more so for Muslims, because if they are people of character, I think they are likely to attract better opportunities for themselves.
Thank you, Qamar sir. Thank you so much. And
Let me just have a quick response to this. It's a very valid question. In fact, let me just talk about Integral University. The reason it's called Integral University is because the wish of the founder and the chancellor has been to integrate values with modern education. So as to provide the best of both worlds. And this is one such effort in that direction. Now, why do we lack kirdar sazi and instilling moral values, etc.? If you talk of Muslim community, I would attribute it to our distance from our religion, because of which we are losing the character that we ought to have. And if I were to talk of all communities combined in the general sense, why do we lack value education and morals and ethics in school is because when we graduate from school or college, we are not judged on this. We are not assessed on this. Our salaries are not based on our morals and character. Our exam results are not based on moral and character. So, we tend to focus on what actually will reward us. And moral and character, unfortunately, in the short term does not reward us. That is why these organizations, they focus more on things that will make the students successful in the examinations and the interviews rather than in life.
Thank you.
It's rather a short-term goal.
Thank you so much.
That's what
Thank you so much, and really appreciate. And Navneet Saab, you raised your hand. You wanted to add something?
Just I wish to acknowledge what Hassan Saab was asking. There is a great difference between how the quality of education is perceived with a Muslim child and how the quality of education is perceived vis-a-vis a majoritarian child. The notion of quality is not similar. Why it is not similar? Because the question of accessibility, the question of inclusivity varies. We have not even resolved the question of accessibility to the Muslim child. So the question of quality with the Muslim education varies vis-a-vis what a majoritarian. Similarly, like when we talk about quality for a Dalit child, for a Muslim child, for a Dalit girl, or a Muslim girl, categorically are very different. We can't have that umbrella term which NEP has tried doing it. No, we need specific steps. We need specific mentions. We need specific financial allocations for that. We can't say that the quality of education in India in overall is bad, but it is more bad for Muslims. We have to peculiarly point out that there is a case of segregation, there is a case of exclusion, there is a case where we do not want to, like, for example, I work in the Department of Teacher Education. How many of teacher educators or even school teachers know that there is something called philosophy of Islamic education? Do they know the difference between ilm, talim and tarbiyah? When a school teacher does not differentiate even between these, do you think that teacher will accommodate the child into the classroom? Differentiating that education is very important. We need to rework on our ideas. Like, we can't do this plastering here and there and say that now the quality of education will evolve. We need something drastic, and it's not only at the level of community which can be done. We need to say it more vociferously, we need to demand it more vociferously, and all citizens of India who celebrate the learning, who celebrate education of everyone and more so of minorities, need to come out for this. We can't say that the quality questions are same for all. No, they vary. They are different. And we need to acknowledge and emphasize and underline that the quality education vis-a-vis Muslims and vis-a-vis Hindus and vis-a-vis other minorities have been categorically segregated, and we need to ask these questions separately. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you so much. So next is Dr. Fazal Khan. There are two questions. If he wants to, I can read them, but if he wants to expand upon, he is welcome to join. But let me begin with Fazal Khan. What percentage of unemployment among Hindus and Muslim graduate? So if you know that, go ahead for that, and then I will read the second, not to.
I have only one data which we worked upon in one of our articles, which said that in comparison to Muslims and other graduates, 14% more Muslims are unemployed in comparison to other graduates. So
Okay.
that's a grave data.
Thank
So
you.
that is the only data that I have access to. So we do not have a very clear-cut distinction. But I think if we go by the usual principle status general employability rate, the unemployability rate is significantly higher amongst Muslims in whichever surveys the religious-wise breakup is available as compared to Hindus. And people have compared Hindu high caste, Hindu OBCs, Hindu SCs, STs, Muslims, and I think the Hindus high caste or upper caste do far better as compared to their counterparts in the other communities and so on. So these are very precise questions. I think these are the question of data, and we may need to have more data. Hopefully, in this census, which we are going to have first reports available in 2027, there is going to be caste-wise enumeration, and that will provide more in-depth understanding of these issues.
Okay, so the difference is 14% in unemployment. What are the real numbers? Actual unemployment means 14% more unemployed. Muslims are 14% more unemployed, right? The unemployment among Hindus is what percent?
No.
Naveen,
I
think we are missing that argument. We are only saying that if one of the Hindu graduate is unemployed, it is the 14 times. It is the 14 times of unemployment amongst Muslims.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for
It's
clarification.
14 times. It is not 1:14. It is the 14 times of the unemployment.
Okay, thank you. The next question, and then I will invite Anamika Sharma. So let's second question from Fazal Khan. Isn't the quality of education same for both Hindus and Muslims in general?
I think Navneet already asked this question. Let me say it differently. Education of elite, economic elite and social elite is not a challenge at all. Let me say it anecdotally. When Khushwant Singh went, Khushwant Singh's father was a very rich man. He was a contractor, and during the constructions, developmental work in Delhi, he was doing very well. So Khushwant Singh went to, I think, Oxford, and after that he came to India, and somebody asked his father in Hindustani कि बेटा क्या करके आया है, क्या पास करके आया है. तो उनके फादर ने कहा ये तो नहीं मालूम कि बेटा क्या पास करके आया है, लेकिन टाइम बहुत पास करके आया है. तो belongings to an elite, he spent a lot of time elsewhere, he still becomes very, very successful. So those who are already third generation learner, fourth generation learner, who comes from economically advantaged group, their education is not a problem. Wherever they go, whichever profession they want to pursue, their lifetime success possibilities are far more compared to people who are from the first generation learner, because they have to overcome many challenges. They don't have that social endowment which rich and elites have. So keep this in mind, and I think things becomes clearer on this issue. So yes, I mean, the poor quality education impacts majority community and the rich and the poor as much, but the rich have the possibility of migrate to pre-Trumpian United States or now today to Europe because they have money to afford best education, if not in the country, elsewhere. But that poor fellow is struggling to provide education to his children within the country, doesn't have means, doesn't have access to bank credits to take loan and to send children to elsewhere. So that is where the difference becomes important. So I think Navneet highlighted it, raised this issue, and I am adding only this to the point. Yes, it may be the same, both are concerned, but I think it hurts more to people who belong to, who have somehow become marginalized.
Thank you.
Muslims.
Namika, can you please hold for a second just to keep the continuation going? Let's see what Dr. Fazal wants to say.
No, thank you, Rafat. The reason I asked that the percentage of unemployment, there is no family in India, at least what I have interacted with, including small towns and villages, that they don't want to send their children for education. Everybody recognizes that, and it's an important aspect of getting out of poverty. However, while they want to send their kids to the school, there is always in the back of their mind that being Muslim, they might not get education, employment. So that always plays the role in their mind. And every minor hick, they just take them out and put them in small businesses. And just also keep on one thing in mind that 15% competing with another 80%. So if one Muslim has a very good education and at the same time there are 7, 8 non-Muslim has the similar education, equally qualified. Now if they go for a job, one job competing, so it is 1 versus 8. So chances for one to get selected is statistically not very feasible actually. So that's another thing that plays a role in India. Anyway, it is what it is. Education is must.
That's a good point you raised here.
Sir, if you permit me, Fazal Saab, I would just like to answer to the last point that you mentioned, that there is a difference, and we have to recognize this difference between equality and equity. So providing equal opportunity, then you would say that if 8 people are competing for one job, so chances are that 1 out of that 8 would succeed. And that is why in the social discourse, we are talking about equity. I mean, if 2 people have their farmland, one is on the height and the other is on lower side of the canal, and you provide an equal opportunity to draw water, the water would naturally flow to the farm that is on the lower side of the canal. You have to make some special efforts to pull water up to the farms which are on the upper side of the canal. So that is where the special efforts are needed. I think you raised a very important point, the first one that you said, and I think that need to be addressed, that is the psychological and emotional issues. If people develop the mindset that they would be discriminated, there will be biases, there would be communalism, they would not get a fair chance, then they are likely to become discouraged. And I think we have to address this issue, and that is where the role of the teacher and the community comes into picture. But let me also share a little experiment that is done in psychology and in management. The experiment is that you have fishes in a jar, and then you drop some fodder to the fish, and the fish swims up to the fodder, eats, is happy, and so on and so forth. Then you insert a transparent jar which acts as a barrier between the fish and the fodder. The fish makes attempts to reach to the fodder, but is not able to reach because of that barrier. And then she sits quietly in one corner of the big jar and stops making any efforts. And then this physical barrier is removed, and whatever nudging is done, is still the fish does not go to the fodder and dies. Now, the learning lesson is that sometimes the barriers could be real, and when you experience too many real barriers, then even if the real barriers are removed, uh, you still see some artificial barriers and you don't access this. And that is where we need to break this psychology that there is a possibility for everyone who has a merit and who can compete. And let us not suffer from this persecution mania that, okay, you will not get a chance. So I would take your first point very seriously.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we are on the top of the hour, but now I see Anamika, please go ahead, and then Ishrat Aziza would be the last one. Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Please.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for insightful talks. With due respect, I would like to offer a reflection, which Dr. Sharma, I think, also briefly touched upon, is that while this conversation has centered on enrollment as an indicator of access to quality education for Muslim in India, I think it is also important to recognize that enrollment in itself does not constitute access to quality education, because access is not merely something that is physical or statistical. It is much more, socio-cultural also, epistemic also, and affective also. So I think the question that we need to ask is that access to what kind of education, and on whose term, and through whose knowledge system. Because Muslim students often enter the kind of educational spaces that are structured by dominant narratives. And these are the kind of narratives that not only exclude them, but also actively construct them as the other. And these are the other who they think they are intellectually deficient and socially incompatible and culturally backward. So in these kind of spaces, the curriculum is not something that is neutral. And also the teacher's gaze is not that is innocent. And the language and their identity as a Muslim, they become both a site of visibility as well as a site of violence. And when here I'm saying that their identity as a Muslim, I will also like to point out that Muslim is not a kind of homogenizing term that we can use, because the issue that Muslim women face in educational discourse, they're much more complex and much more layered than those of Muslim men. And this is something which is both Islamic and feminist discourse have conveniently ignored. So I think to speak of access without interrogating the ideological architecture of the educational system, this is, I think, it is a kind of risk where we mistake inclusion for justice. So I think it is imperative that we also reflect on these structural, symbolic, and epistemic barriers that these students are facing, if we are to truly understand what access to quality education means for Muslim student in this country.
Thank you, Anamika.
Anamika, I can only say that I agree with you 100%.
Thank you.
Very
Okay.
valuable.
Very, very well said. So, Ishrat Aziz Saab, that would be the last question.
Thank you. I listened to all the three speakers with great attention, and they gave a lot of facts and statistics. I just want to say something very briefly. Furqaan Saab gave a very good example. There is a canal on one side, the water flows more easily than the other. So you have to, put in extra effort to take the water uphill, let's say. And I think I always use the example that Muslims face headwind, but the only way to overcome that problem, and it will solve lots of our problems, and that is hard work. I mean, access to quality education is not for you to decide. It is in the hands of others. But hard work is your own asset. And those who focus on hard work don't have to wait for an opportunity and access. They will create opportunity, they will create access. I could go on and on and on, but I thought I will very briefly say this because I'm a believer in hard work. When there are challenges, try to overcome it. Don't look for shortcuts. Thank you.
कमर साहब, इशरत अजीज साहब जो हैं
Okay.
एम्बेसडर थे, जो यहाँ पर इस वक्त टेक्सास में हैं, तो जरा सा उनके बारे में बता दें।
Ishrat, thank you very much for asking this question.
Razi bhai,
Yes.
thank you so much. Back to you, please. Don't ask too many questions. I know this is a favorite topic for you.
ये बहुत सारी बहुत टाइम चला गया है, more than 2 hours, और मैं देख रहा हूँ कि थोड़ा थकान आपके चेहरे से भी आ रही है कमर साहब। तो बहरहाल अब आप और बहुत क्वेश्चंस हो गए, बहुत लोगों ने पूछ लिए। देयर इज नथिंग न्यू दैट आई कैन आस्क, बट ऑब्वियसली मुस्लिम कम्युनिटी को भी थोड़ा सा रिफ्लेक्ट करना चाहिए हार्ड वर्क के लिए या एफर्ट करने के लिए। I mean, look, we cry so much, we have so many problems, but none of us have been able to drive others to make a education fund even. कोई भी जनरल एजुकेशन फंड नहीं है इंडिया में जो इसी बात को सोचे कि चलो गरीब बच्चों को और आगे बढ़ा दो। कोई एफर्ट नहीं है कि कोई इंटेलेक्चुअल पूल हो कि जो इन चीजों के लिए नया चार्ट आउट रास्ता करे। आई मीन देयर आर मेनी थिंग्स दैट पीपल कैन से, criticism is easy, but effort and going into the field work, putting together some intellectual pool or financial resources, these are missing. I mean, the government, if they are indifferent what the community is doing, at least some level we have to have, and of course the hard work.
Yeah, Razi bhai, you are absolutely right. But what Nadeem said that this is
the hard work. I mean, but
this
look,
is the responsibility of the government, the state government.
Yeah, of course.
You can pitch in, you can pitch in, but the ultimate.
But the government is indifferent. So if the government is indifferent, you cannot just keep on crying, this is the responsibility of them. Yes, of course it is the responsibility of them. But if they're not doing, you should at least try to do something. But that is also missing. That part is quite missing. I cannot just compromise on that. The Muslim community itself has to rise either politically or socially or intellectually to chart out a course. And that is missing. What is not missing is our saying that government is not doing, it is the responsibility. Anyway, thank you very
so
much.
Let's wrap it up. Thank you once again, all the speakers. And it was one of the most favorite topic, at least for us.
Wonderful talk. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Ishrat bhai hard work में believe करते हैं. He is an example of just what we call a success story, and he is right that hard work में किसी को तो रोका नहीं गया है. And people have become very successful, even coming from the very marginalized section of the Muslim community, not from the creamy layer of the Muslim community, even from the very marginalized section of the Muslim community. There are many who have really risen up to the high posts and became professors, became bureaucrats, became all kind of things. There are hard work always pays. Well, thank you very much, Ishrat bhai, and thank you all these speakers. And we look forward to a very politically charged session next week, which is really the crux of the matter, 1946 assembly elections, setting the course of two-nation theory. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you. Thank you. In the end, thank you to all of you.
I'm a great believer in hard work. Thank you.
जी बिल्कुल बिल्कुल.
Thank you very
It
much.
pays.
Thank you.
It pays.
ओके फुरकान साहब, बिल्कुल मिलेंगे इंशाल्लाह. लखनऊ में आके मिलेंगे आपसे जरूर. चलिए, थैंक यू.
Okay, that concludes the session. Thank you so much.
Bye. Take care. Bye.